Well, hello everybody and welcome. Thanks for watching. Today's topic, just a quick update on a few albums that I picked up last weekend over at Puba's. Let's get started. First up, and pretty much I think they're all from the 70s. First up, Sly and the Family Stone, Greatest Hits. I love Sly and the Family Stone. I had a poster of Sly on my wall when I was a teenager. And so I grab his albums when I can get my hands on them. Now, this isn't like, one of his studio records with just regular songs. It's a compilation, greatest hits, but I'll take it because it's one way to get most of his songs that I love just all in one shot, right? And the other reason why I grabbed it is because, dig this. Big, beautiful gatefold cover. Nice, huh? And how about these Wookiee boots? Look at that. All right, Sly. And there you go. There's his loving mug that I had on my bedroom wall when I was a kid. Now, I picked it up pretty much, like I said, 50% based on getting this great gatefold cover. And I thought what the drawback of this is, the small criticism is, this essay. I said to myself, oh, cool, I'm going to read an essay about what somebody wrote about Sly Stone, right? And no, not very good at all. See, it was whoever wrote this. Who is this? Let's give proper credit. Let's see who wrote this. Can I read this without my reading glasses? Morgan Ames, pop music editor, High Fidelity. So they got some highfalutin person in the music industry to write this essay, and it's a highfalutin essay that just forget it. All it was an exercise in trying to show you how many big words this person can use and in the end say nothing. So, bunk essay. Otherwise, great. I prefer side 2. I prefer side 2 because it has my favorite Sly Stallone song, I Wanna Thank You for Letting Me. All right, so this song, this album, great. There's number 1, right? I'm very happy to pick that up. Number 2, second album, Jackson Browne, The Pretender. Funny that I don't have this album yet, but now I do. Now, there's something that I was going to mention about this that I always felt was really interesting about this album. Now, this album dropped something like in 75 or so. And I was on my own venturing out to record stores back then. And the record store that I would go to was Music Plus, which was out in Atlantic Square in East LA, if you know Music Plus then. All right, so I used to see this Jackson Browne album, and I used to grab it, but I didn't know Jackson Browne, because at the time, what was I listening to in 75? I was listening to soul music, and so I wasn't listening to rock and roll very much, and certainly I wasn't listening to folksy rock and roll. And so I heard of Jackson Browne and I heard The Pretender on the radio like everybody did back then, but I wasn't really totally sold on buying the album. But I would always grab the album in the racks and look at it and spend a lot of time looking at it and thinking about it, because that's just what I did in the record store back then when I was young. That was a great place to kill time. Today's kids, hey, they don't have that, do they? But anyways, I grabbed this album and I used to stare at the cover all the time, because you can see, or I could see anyway, the obvious similarities to the environment that I was living in. The East LA downtown LA, Cholo graffiti, Cholo uniform of the day. That was my environment. And I was always compelled because this gringo, this Jackson Browne, is what's the trip with him? And his album cover, was written in pretty much the Cholo script of the day. That's what graffiti looked like then. And I tripped because he was wearing the same uniform that many of us wore that grew up in LA. White t-shirt, khaki pants, or khaki colored pants, or full on khakis. There you go. Who's this guy? And then he's like in a downtown background shot. And I used to look at this, and here's something else that I used to notice. He's got another person right here. Is it coincidence or is it planned? This person also dressed in the classic Chicano Cholo uniform of East LA of the day, just in dark. He's got the beanie, he's got the dark sweatshirt, he's got the dark khakis, and he's coming opposite, maybe confronting our hero. That's how I used to read the drama of this photo. Now, that's just my personal trip that I used to trip out on. Now, here's something that I didn't know back then, and I just learned when I was reading about the album. As I mentioned before, I love to play the albums and then just kind of read about them and learn a little bit about the making of it and the background behind it. So what I learned was Jackson Browne was writing the song, The Pretender, and in particular working on the song, The Pretender, and in particular working on the group of songs for this album at the time that his old lady, depending on what you read, they'll say committed suicide, but you might read something else and see that she actually passed away, died of an overdose. I'm not even gonna get into did she commit suicide, was it an accidental overdose or whatever, but I'm gonna think that I'm gonna go to bed thinking it was just an accidental overdose, and not how can it be less tragic than if she took her life on purpose, But Jackson Browne lost his wife and was left as a single father with a 2-year-old son when he was putting this album together. And then you go back and listen to these songs and you see really how poignant so much of the lyrics and so much of the storytelling in his songs is intertwined with that tragedy in his life. Now, where some songwriters will spiral that into the deepest, darkest album you ever heard, one thing that's very interesting about The Pretender is that sprinkled in with Jackson Browne reminding us that time is short and make your move while you've got the time to do it, he's also bringing and dropping droplets of hope. In the depths of having a family tragedy, he's also singing about hope on these songs. Props and much respect to Jackson Browne. So I'm very happy to have this album. I've now got something like maybe a half a dozen Jackson Browne albums. Next up, 2 albums to go. Next up, replacing an album that was taken in the great punk rock robbery of the 80s. I love this Police album. I'm a good fan of the Police. But this one here, this is my favorite album. Leave all the others, even if they never made another album again. This one is the one for me. I mean, it's got my favorite Police songs. And when you sit down and listen to this and you just think about it's only 3 guys knocking these sounds out on this album, so good. Great lineup of songs. Next to You, So Lonely. My favorite of all Police songs, So Lonely. That song just cuts right to the heart on me. So I'm very happy to have this album back in the fold, back with me. Great, good stuff here. Finally, Van Morrison. I didn't even know this album existed. As I said, I'm collecting Van Morrison and I'm becoming more aware of his discography and learning how much that I really love Van Morrison's stuff. Here we go. Album number 6 from Van Morrison. This is, I think this one is right after Tupelo Honey. St. Dominic's Preview. What a great album. Now it starts out with like the friendly radio hit that most people know from the radio, Jackie Wilson said. And then all it does is even get better from there. That's saying something when you take that like poppy, funky rhythm and blues radio hit, Jackie Wilson said, and say that's like the least song on the album as far as I'm concerned, because every other album from there just goes upward musically. Beautiful stuff. Leanings into gospel areas, leanings into musical meditations, 10 minutes long, 11 minutes long. Follow the path of the music. Just absolutely beautiful stuff that harks back to, you can still hear Astral Weeks in here. You can hear Moondance in here. So it's, you know what, it's a very good culmination of the previous songs feeding into this album and exploding into something even newer. So maybe my favorite Van Morrison album. Certainly my favorite Van Morrison album right now. Love this album. So happy to have got my hands on it. All right, so there you go. 4 albums from the 70s, new to my collection. Very happy to have them. Very happy that you joined me to watch. And we'll see you next time. Peace.